If you thought you had seen it all regarding prejudice and abuse of power, this video will make you question the reality we live in. Stay until the end, because what happened during this traffic stop will leave you speechless, and we will reveal why this moment is so important for all of us. What you are about to see is shocking and could change the way you view justice. Officer Barbrady and his rookie partner Lenny were patrolling the city streets in their police car. The air inside the vehicle was thick with tension as Barbrady complained about the recent changes in the police department's leadership. Can you believe they put one of them in charge? Barbrady spat, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. This department is going down the drain. Lenny shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had only been on the force for a few months, but Barbrady's blatant racism made him nervous. Maybe we should give the new captain a chance, he suggested cautiously. Barbrady scoffed. You're too naive, kid. They're all the same. You can't trust them. As they turned onto the main street, Barbrady's eyes narrowed as he spotted a sleek black sedan. The driver, a well-dressed black man, was obeying all traffic laws, but something about him didn't sit right with Barbrady. Look at that, Barbrady murmured. I bet that car's stolen. Lenny frowned. We can't know that, sir. He's not doing anything wrong. That's what you think, Barbrady retorted, turning on the patrol car's lights. Time for a little routine check. The black sedan pulled over smoothly. Lenny could see the driver's shoulders tense as Barbrady exited the patrol car. Sir, please, Lenny pleaded. This doesn't feel right. Barbrady ignored him and approached the sedan with an arrogant smile on his face. Lenny reluctantly followed, his stomach churning with unease. As they got closer, the driver's window was rolled down. The man inside was composed but cautious, his eyes moving between the two officers. Is there a problem, officers? He asked calmly. Barbrady leaned in, his face just inches from the driver's. License and registration, he demanded in a tone full of contempt. The driver complied, handing over his documents without protest. Lenny noticed the man's hands were slightly trembling. DeAndre Johnson, Barbrady read aloud, twisting his lips. What brings you to this neighborhood, Mr. Johnson? I'm on my way to a meeting, DeAndre replied calmly. Is there any reason you've stopped me? Barbrady's eyes narrowed. Here, we ask the questions. Get out of the vehicle. DeAndre hesitated, looking at Lenny, who averted his gaze in embarrassment. Slowly, DeAndre opened the car door and stepped out. Lenny could feel the tension rising. He knew this was wrong, but he didn't know how to stop it. As Barbrady began his invasive questioning, Lenny's mind raced, searching for a way to defuse the situation before it spiraled out of control. Little did they know that this routine traffic stop was about to change their lives forever. Barbrady circled DeAndre's car like a predator stalking his prey, his eyes scanning every corner of the vehicle for any excuse to escalate the situation. Nice car you have here, Mr. Johnson, Barbrady said disdainfully. How can someone like you afford something like that? DeAndre took a deep breath, maintaining his composure. I work hard to earn my money, officer. I'm on my way to an important meeting. Could you tell me why you've stopped me? Barbrady ignored the question, his hand resting on his gun. Mind if we take a look inside? Actually, I do mind, DeAndre responded firmly. I haven't done anything wrong, and I do not consent to a search. Barbrady's face twisted in anger. Oh, you've got something to hide, don't you? Without warning, Barbrady swung the car door open and began rummaging through the vehicle. DeAndre took a step forward to protest, but Lenny quickly stepped between them. Sir, please back off, Lenny said, his voice slightly trembling. As Barbrady searched the car, he discreetly pulled a small bag of white powder from his pocket skillfully and slid it under the driver's seat. Lenny saw the movement out of the corner of his eye, and his heart began to race as he realized what was happening. This was no longer just racial profiling. It was a setup. Well, Barbrady announced triumphantly, exiting the car with the bag. What do we have here? DeAndre's eyes widened in disbelief. That's not mine. You just planted it there. Barbrady smirked disdainfully. Looks like we have a drug dealer. You're under arrest. As Barbrady prepared to handcuff him, DeAndre's calm facade finally cracked. This is absurd, I'm telling you. That's not mine. Lenny felt sick. He knew what he was witnessing was wrong, a blatant abuse of power. His father's words echoed in his mind. A true officer protects and serves all people, son, not just those who look like us. The tension in the air was palpable. DeAndre, realizing the gravity of the situation, looked at Lenny with pleading eyes. "Officer, you saw what happened. Tell him this isn't right." Brady turned, looking at Lenny with fury. "Don't listen to him, rookie. This is how we clean the streets." Lenny froze, torn between his duty to his partner and his moral obligation to defend justice. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, forcing him to make a decision that would change the course of his career and perhaps his life. As Brady moved to handcuff DeAndre, the situation teetered on the brink of explosion. The next moments would determine whether justice would prevail or if an innocent man's life would be destroyed by unchecked prejudice and corruption. The world seemed to slow down as Lenny watched Brady reach for the handcuffs. At that moment, a flood of memories overwhelmed him. His father's proud smile when he graduated from the police academy, the countless stories of integrity and honor he had grown up with, the oath he had taken to protect and serve. Enough. Lenny's voice rang out, surprising even himself with its firmness. Brady froze, his hand halfway to DeAndre's wrist. "What did you say, rookie?" Lenny stepped forward, placing himself between his partner and DeAndre. His heart pounded in his chest, but his determination grew stronger with each passing second. "I said stop, Officer Brady. This isn't right, and you know it." Brady's face twisted in anger. "Listen here, punk. I've been on this force longer than you've been alive. You have no right to tell me what's right or wrong." "Maybe not," Lenny replied, standing his ground. "But I know what I saw. You planted that evidence. This man is innocent." DeAndre, still tense, but now with a glimmer of hope in his eyes, remained silent, watching the confrontation unfold. Brady's voice dropped to a threatening growl. "You're making a big mistake, kid. I can ruin your career right here and now. Is that what you want?" For a second, doubt took hold of Lenny. His dream had always been to be a cop, to make a difference. Was he really willing to throw it all away? But then he looked at DeAndre, saw the fear and desperation in his eyes, and knew he couldn't back down. "If standing up for what's right means losing my job, so be it. I won't be a part of this." Brady's face reddened with fury. He jabbed a finger into Lenny's chest. "You're finished, do you hear me? Finished. I'll make sure you never wear a badge again." Lenny stood firm, his voice steady. "Go ahead. But I'm not moving, and you're not arresting this man with false charges." The tension between the two officers was palpable. DeAndre, sensing an opportunity, tried to calm the situation. "Officers, please. There's no need for this to escalate. We can resolve this peacefully." Brady turned to DeAndre. "Shut your mouth. You have no right to speak." But Lenny had found his courage. He placed a hand on Brady's shoulder, pulling him back. "That's enough. He has rights, and you're violating them." The sergeant pushed Lenny's hand away. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, kid. Don't think I won't report this insubordination." Lenny straightened up, his father's words echoing in his ears. "Go ahead and report it. I'd rather lose my job than lose my integrity." As the confrontation reached its boiling point, none of the three realized that this moment would be the catalyst for change far beyond this traffic stop. Lenny's stance against injustice was about to trigger a series of events that would shake the very foundations of their police department and the community. The air crackled with tension as Brady, Lenny, and DeAndre stood still in their standoff. Traffic slowed as passing drivers watched the unfolding scene on the side of the road. DeAndre, seeing that there was no other way out of the situation, decided to take a risk. "Officers," he said, his voice calm but authoritative, "I think there's something both of you need to know." Brady scoffed. "Save it for the judge, buddy." But DeAndre insisted. "I am Captain DeAndre Johnson, the new head of your precinct." The words hung in the air for a moment before their impact took effect. Brady's face drained of color as Lenny's eyes widened in surprise. That can't be," Brady stammered, his bravado evaporating. DeAndre slowly reached into his jacket, making both officers tense, but only pulled out his badge and identification. "I was heading to the station to meet with the commissioner when you stopped me." Lenny took the badge, examining it closely before handing it to Barbrady. The sergeant's hands trembled as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. I didn't know," Barbrady murmured, his previous confidence completely shattered. DeAndre's eyes hardened. "Would it have made any difference if I had known? Should it make any difference? All citizens deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their position or the color of their skin." Barbrady, desperate to salvage the situation, began to back away. "Captain, I can explain. You see, we've had reports of drug trafficking in this area, and—" "Enough," DeAndre interrupted him. "I saw you plant those drugs in my car, officer." He turned to Lenny. "Sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Lenny, sir. Lenny Thompson." "Officer Thompson saw it too, didn't he?" Lenny nodded, his face reflecting a mix of relief and determination. "Yes, sir. I saw it." Barbrady's desperation turned to anger. He turned to Lenny. "Little traitor, after all I've taught you, are you going to side with him?" "I'm on the side of the truth," Lenny responded firmly. DeAndre stepped between them. "That's enough, Officer Barbrady. Your actions today have not only violated department policy, but also the law. You are suspended with immediate effect." Turning your badge and weapon, Barbrady's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me. I've dedicated 20 years to this force. And in those 20 years, how many innocent lives have you ruined?" DeAndre asked quietly. "How many people have suffered because of your prejudices?" The weight of those questions seemed to crush Barbrady. His shoulders slumped as the reality of his actions finally sank in. As DeAndre called for backup over the radio, a small crowd had gathered, many with phones in hand, recording the scene. The story of a corrupt police officer caught in the act by the very man he tried to frame was about to go viral. Lenny, still processing everything that had happened, approached DeAndre. "Sir, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." DeAndre placed a hand on Lenny's shoulder. "You did the right thing when it mattered, Officer Thompson. That's what counts." As they waited for backup to arrive, both men knew this was just the beginning. The revelation of Captain Johnson's identity had set the stage for a much larger confrontation, one that would force their department and city to face head-on the deeply ingrained problems of racism and corruption. As the confrontation between DeAndre, Barbrady, and Lenny unfolded, the small crowd of onlookers grew. Phones were recording every moment of the tense scene. The quiet suburban street had become an impromptu stage for a drama that would soon captivate the entire city. "Isn't that the new police captain?" someone in the crowd whispered. The murmur spread quickly, and soon people were shouting words of support to DeAndre and Lenny, while hurling insults at Barbrady. "Justice for Captain Johnson. Arrest the corrupt cop." "We're with you, Captain." The chorus of voices grew louder, the crowd's energy palpable. Barbrady, his face a mask of rage and fear, frantically looked around, realizing he was outnumbered and exposed. Amid the commotion, a child's voice cut through the noise. "Dad!" DeAndre's head snapped toward his car. In the back seat, previously unnoticed in the chaos, was his 10-year-old son, Marcus. The child's eyes were wide open, full of fear and confusion as he watched the scene unfold. DeAndre's heart sank. Amid all the tension, he had momentarily forgotten that his son was with him, on his way to be left at a friend's house before the important meeting. Now Marcus was witnessing firsthand the harsh reality of the world DeAndre had tried to protect him from. "It's okay, Marcus," DeAndre called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "Everything's going to be okay. Just stay in the car, okay?" Marcus nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on Barbrady, who was now retreating in front of the growing crowd. Lenny, noticing the child, moved to stand between the car and Barbrady, his protective instincts kicking in. As the situation escalated, local news vans began to arrive, attracted by the noise on social media that was already spreading like wildfire. Reporters rushed through the crowd, shouting questions. "Captain Johnson, can you comment on what's happening here? Officer, is he being unfairly arrested? Is this a case of racial profiling gone wrong?" DeAndre raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd and the press. Please, everyone back off. This is an ongoing police matter. We will answer all questions in due time. But the crowd would not be silenced. Years of pent-up frustration over police misconduct were erupting. People began sharing their own stories of mistreatment and prejudice, each account fueling the anger of those around them. Bar Brady, overwhelmed by the turn of events, made a desperate maneuver toward his patrol car. "This is a misunderstanding," he shouted. "I was just doing my job." His words only further enraged the crowd, who began chanting, "No justice, no peace," echoing down the street. Lenny, seeing the situation spiraling out of control, used his radio to send a message. "We need additional units for crowd control at our location. Situation is tense but currently nonviolent." DeAndre, torn between his roles as father, police captain, and black man facing injustice, took a deep breath. He knew his next actions would set the tone, not only for this incident, but for his entire tenure as captain. As sirens sounded in the distance, signaling the arrival of backup, DeAndre prepared himself. This was no longer just a traffic stop gone wrong. It had become a turning point for the simmering complaints of the community, a moment that would define the relationship between the police and the people they were sworn to protect. The eyes of the city were on them, and the world was about to take notice. The wail of sirens grew louder as police vehicles sped toward the scene. Lenny, realizing the volatile nature of the situation, ran toward the incoming cars, waving his arms to get their attention. "Over here," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the crowd's shouts. When the first patrol car screeched to a halt, two officers jumped out, their hands near their holsters, observing the scene with confusion, taking in the angry crowd, Bar Brady being cornered, and DeAndre standing calmly in the center of it all. "What's going on here?" demanded Sergeant Rodriguez, the lead officer of the newly arrived backup. Lenny, out of breath, began to explain. "Sergeant, we have a situation." Officer Bar Brady made an illegal stop and tried to plant evidence. The man he stopped is, in fact, Captain Johnson, our new precinct leader. Rodriguez's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious, Thompson?" Meanwhile, Bar Brady, seeing his chance slipping away, made a desperate move. He lunged for the bag of planted drugs, intending to destroy the evidence of his misconduct. "He's going for the drugs," someone in the crowd shouted. DeAndre, alert to the danger, reacted with the speed and precision that his years of training gave him. He knocked Bar Brady to the ground, pinning him firmly. "Officer Bar Brady, you're under arrest," DeAndre announced, his voice ringing over the now silent crowd. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The crowd erupted in cheers as Sergeant Rodriguez rushed to assist with the arrest. Lenny, relieved, stepped forward to help as well. As Bar Brady was being handcuffed and led to a patrol car, he began yelling, "This is a setup. You can't do this to me, I have rights." DeAndre, maintaining his composure, turned to address the gathered officers and civilians. "Please, everyone stay calm. The situation is now under control. We will conduct a thorough investigation of today's events, and I assure you that justice will be served." The newly arrived officers, still trying to piece together what had happened, began to disperse the crowd. News cameras were recording every moment of the dramatic scene. Lenny, with his adrenaline finally subsiding, approached DeAndre. "Sir, I want you to know I'm ready to give a full statement about what I witnessed today." DeAndre nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "Thank you, Officer Thompson. The integrity you've shown today is exactly what this department needs." As the chaos began to settle, DeAndre remembered his son. He ran to his car and opened the back door. "Marcus, are you okay?" The boy nodded, eyes wide open. "Dad, what's going to happen now?" DeAndre hugged his son tightly. "Now we're going to do things right. This is what I've been fighting for, son. That's why my job is so important." As father and son embraced, Sergeant Rodriguez approached. "Captain, the press is asking for a statement, and the commissioner is on his way." DeAndre took a deep breath. He knew the real battle was just beginning. Brady's arrest was only the first step in addressing the systemic problems plaguing the department. Looking at Lenny, then his son, and finally at the diverse crowd of citizens watching expectantly, DeAndre straightened his shoulders. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope for real change. Backup had arrived, not only in the form of additional officers, but also in the awakening of a community willing to fight for justice. The real work was about to begin. As the scene stabilized, the air was still thick with tension. The commissioner's car pulled up, lights flashing. Commissioner Holt, a man with a stern face in his 60s, emerged from the vehicle, his expression a mix of concern and irritation. "Captain Johnson," he called, walking toward DeAndre with a firm stride. "What the hell is going on here?" DeAndre stood tall, meeting the commissioner's gaze. "Sir, we had an incident with Officer Brady. He made an illegal stop and tried to plant evidence." Holt's eyebrows raised. "These are serious accusations, Captain. Do you have proof?" "Yes, I do." Lenny stepped forward, his voice firm despite the nerves. "I witnessed the entire incident, sir. Officer Brady planted drugs in Captain Johnson's vehicle." The commissioner's gaze shifted between DeAndre, Lenny, and the patrol car where Brady sat, his face a mixture of anger and fear. "This is a nightmare," Holt muttered, then louder. "All right, I want statements from all involved and have someone remove those news cameras from here." But it was already too late. The story was already spreading like wildfire on social media. Mobile phones were capturing every moment as Brady was led from the patrol car to face the commissioner. "This is all a misunderstanding," Brady shouted. "You can't seriously believe this." Brady yelled, his composure finally breaking down. "Are you going to believe this rookie and a guy who just showed up saying he's a captain?" DeAndre stepped forward, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "I am Captain DeAndre Johnson, and I was on my way to meet with the commissioner when you illegally stopped me and tried to frame me for drug possession." The crowd, momentarily silent due to the commissioner's arrival, began to murmur again, and chants of "justice" and "lock him up" spread among those present. Commissioner Holt raised his hands, calling for silence. "This situation will be handled according to protocol. Officer Brady is suspended pending a full investigation. Captain Johnson, I need a full report on my desk by tomorrow morning." Brady's face contorted with rage. "Is this how you're going to treat me, Holt, after all these years? You know how things work on the streets. Sometimes you have to bend the rules to get results." A silence fell over the crowd. Even those who moments before were shouting for Brady's arrest were surprised by that admission. DeAndre approached Brady, his voice low but firm in the sudden silence. "Rules aren't made to be bent, Brady. They're made to protect everyone, including the officers who enforce them. Your actions today, and apparently for years, have not only violated the law but also eroded the trust between the police and the community we swear to protect." Lenny, encouraged by DeAndre's words, raised his voice. "Sir," he addressed the commissioner, "I'm prepared to give a full statement about today's events and about other incidents I've witnessed during my time with Officer Brady." Brady lunged at Lenny, his face bruised with anger. "Damn traitor. I'll finish you off," he shouted as several officers rushed to restrain him. He continued yelling threats and insults. Commissioner Holt, with a grim face, nodded to the officers. "Take him away and make sure he's charged with attempted assault on an officer, in addition to everything else." As Brady was taken away, still shouting, DeAndre addressed the crowd. "I know many of you have lost faith in law enforcement. What happened here today is unforgivable, but I promise you this. Under my leadership, we will eradicate corruption, confront racial prejudice, and work tirelessly to rebuild trust with our community." The crowd's angry shouts slowly turned into cautious applause. It wasn't full support, but it was a start. As the scene began to disperse, DeAndre met Lenny's gaze. The young officer stood a little taller, knowing he had made the right decision. The road ahead would be tough, but today it had been shown that change was possible, one brave step at a time. The confrontation was over, but the real work of reforming the department and healing the community was just beginning. In the following days, A whirlwind of activity ensued as the repercussions of Barbrady's actions reverberated through the department and the community. The incident had unveiled years of systemic problems within the police force. Barbrady, stripped of his badge and weapon, sat in a cell, a far cry from the arrogant officer he had been just days before. His court appearance was a media circus, with protesters gathering outside the courthouse demanding justice. Inside the courtroom, Barbrady's facade of righteousness crumbled as the evidence mounted against him. Lenny's testimony was compelling, providing a first-hand account of the attempted framing. But it was what happened next that truly sealed Barbrady's fate. Encouraged by Lenny's bravery, other officers came forward with their own stories. Years of Barbrady's misconduct, racial profiling, and abuse of power were exposed. Each new revelation sent shockwaves through the department and the community. Your Honor, the prosecutor addressed the judge. What we have here is not just an isolated incident, but a pattern of behavior that has eroded the very foundations of trust between the police and the citizens they swore to protect. Barbrady's lawyer tried to paint him as a product of his time, an old-school cop struggling to adapt to changing norms, but the evidence was overwhelming. As the judge prepared to announce the verdict, DeAndre sat silently, aware of the gravity of the moment. The gallery had faces of calm and determination. Beside DeAndre, Lenny fidgeted nervously, the weight of his testimony pressing down on his shoulders. "Officer Barbrady," began the judge, her stern voice, "your actions have not only violated the law but have betrayed the trust this community placed in you. You have used your position of authority to intimidate and discriminate, instead of protecting and serving." The courtroom held its breath as the judge continued. "Therefore, I find you guilty on all counts. You are sentenced to 5 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 3 years. Additionally, you are permanently disqualified from serving in any capacity within law enforcement." A collective sigh swept through the courtroom, followed by a mix of cheers and surprised murmurs. Barbrady, with a sullen face, was led away in handcuffs. He no longer yelled or protested, but remained silent and defeated. Outside the courthouse, DeAndre addressed the press and concerned citizens waiting. "Today justice has been served," he began, his voice firm and resolute. "But this is just the beginning. We have a long way to go to rebuild trust and ensure that what happened with Officer Barbrady never happens again." He turned to Lenny, who was nearby, still processing the events. Officers like Lenny Thompson, who had the courage to stand up for what's right, represent the future of our department. From now on, we will foster a culture of accountability and integrity. As the crowd began to disperse, a mixture of hope and skepticism hung in the air. Barbrady's downfall was a significant victory, but it also exposed deeply rooted problems that wouldn't be solved overnight. DeAndre and Lenny shared a meaningful look. Both knew that the real work was just beginning. The department needed to be rebuilt from the ground up, and they were committed to seeing it through. As they walked back to their patrol car, DeAndre placed a hand on Lenny's shoulder. "You did well, Thompson. Your father would be proud." Lenny nodded, a small smile appearing on his lips. For the first time since he joined the force, he felt he was truly living up to the ideals that had inspired him to become a police officer. Barbrady's fall marked the end of an era, but also signaled the beginning of a new one. The path forward would be challenging, but with leaders like DeAndre and officers like Lenny, there was hope for real and lasting change. In the weeks following Barbrady's conviction, the police department underwent a dramatic transformation. Captain DeAndre Johnson, now firmly established in his role, began implementing deep reforms. The precinct was bustling with activity as DeAndre called for a general meeting. Officers entered the meeting room, a mix of anticipation and apprehension on their faces. At the front of the room, DeAndre stood tall, with Lenny by his side. "Officers," DeAndre began, his voice projecting authority and warmth, "we are at a crossroads. The events of the past few weeks have shaken our department to its core, but from this crisis emerges an opportunity to rebuild, to do it better, to truly serve and protect all members of our community." He then outlined his plan: mandatory bias training for all officers, a civilian oversight committee, body cameras for every patrol, and a zero-tolerance policy toward discriminatory behavior. Some officers shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded in approval. "I know change isn't easy," DeAndre continued, "but it's necessary. We owe it to ourselves and the community we serve." As the meeting concluded, Lenny found himself surrounded by fellow officers, many congratulating him for his bravery, others seeking advice on how to navigate the impending changes in the department. Meanwhile, in the community, the atmosphere was cautiously optimistic. DeAndre made sure to attend neighborhood meetings, community events, and even local basketball games, working tirelessly to rebuild the fractured relationship between the police and the public. One afternoon, as Lenny finished his patrol, he spotted a familiar face: DeAndre's son, Marcus, playing basketball at a local park. Lenny stopped and got out of his patrol car. "Hey, Marcus," he called. "Do you mind if I join?" The boy hesitated for a moment before nodding. As they played, other neighborhood kids joined in, and soon a full game was underway, with kids and a police officer laughing and playing together. DeAndre arrived to pick up Marcus and couldn't help but smile at the scene. He joined the game, and for a brief moment, the weight of his responsibilities lifted as he enjoyed the simple pleasure of a neighborhood basketball game. As the sun began to set, DeAndre gathered everyone around. "This," he said, pointing to the diverse group of children and adults, "this is what community policing means. It's about being part of the neighborhood, not just watching over it." Lenny nodded, increasingly understanding the true meaning of serving the community. This was why he had decided to become a police officer, not to enforce laws blindly, but to be a positive presence in his community. In the following months, crime rates began to decrease and, more importantly, community satisfaction with the police force increased. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges and setbacks, but progress was undeniable. A year after the incident that had started it all, DeAndre found himself standing before the graduating class of the police academy. Lenny, now a decorated officer and mentor to new recruits, sat in the front row. "You are entering a noble profession at a crucial time," DeAndre told the graduates. "Your job is not just to enforce laws, but also to build trust, to serve with compassion, and always to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." As the new officers received their badges, a sense of hope was in the air. The department had gone through a difficult period of introspection and change, but had emerged stronger, more transparent, and more connected with the community it served. DeAndre met Lenny's gaze and nodded. They both knew that the work was far from over, but they were on the right path. A new era of policing had begun, based on the principles of integrity, accountability, and collaboration with the community. 2 years had passed since that fateful day of Brady's arrest. Under DeAndre's leadership and with officers like Lenny setting a new standard, the police department had made significant strides in reforming its practices and rebuilding community trust. However, the specter of the past still loomed over them, especially as Brady's appeal hearing approached. The courthouse was packed, with media teams camped outside and a mix of supporters and protesters filling the street. Inside, DeAndre and Lenny sat stoically in the gallery, their presence a testament to the importance of the moment. Brady, looking worse for wear after 2 years in prison, was brought into the courtroom. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now nervously scanned the room. His lawyer presented arguments for a sentence reduction, citing Brady's long history of service and claiming he was a product of a flawed system. When it came time for the prosecution, they held nothing back. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "Mr. Brady's actions were not isolated incidents, nor merely the result of a flawed system. They were deliberate abuses of power that destroyed lives and eroded public trust in law enforcement." As evidence was presented, including testimony from individuals whose lives had been negatively impacted by Brady's actions over the years, the true magnitude of the harm became evident. Families shattered by false arrests, careers ruined by planted evidence, and a community living in fear of those sworn to protect them. Lenny was called to testify once more. His voice was steady as he recounted not only the incident with DeAndre, but also other episodes of misconduct he had witnessed during his time as Brady's partner. When DeAndre took the stand, He spoke not only as a victim of Barbrady's actions, but as the leader of a department working to correct past mistakes. "Your Honor," he said, "the harm Mr. Barbrady has caused goes beyond individual cases. He has created a culture of distrust that we are still trying to overcome. Our community deserves justice, not just for one incident, but for years of systemic abuse." As the hearing progressed, it became clear that this was not just about the fate of one man, but about responsibility, sending a message that no one is above the law, especially those entrusted to uphold it. Finally, the judge delivered her decision. "Mr. Barbrady, having reviewed all the evidence and testimonies, I find no reason to reduce your sentence. Furthermore, in light of the new evidence presented, I am adding 2 years to your original sentence. You will serve a total of 7 years, with no possibility of parole for 5 years. A collective sigh swept through the courtroom. Barbrady slumped in his chair, the last vestiges of his defiance crumbling. Outside the courthouse, DeAndre addressed the waiting press and concerned citizens. "Today, justice has been served, not only for me, but for all members of our community who have suffered due to abuse of power. But let this also be a reminder that our work is not finished. We must remain vigilant, hold ourselves accountable, and continue to fight for a system that truly serves and protects everyone, regardless of their race or background." As the crowd dispersed, Lenny approached DeAndre. "Do you think this will make a difference, sir?" Lenny asked. DeAndre nodded slowly. "It's a start, Lenny. It sends a message that times have changed, that we are committed to doing better. But real change, lasting change, comes from what we do every day on the streets, in our interactions with the community." They walked together toward their patrol car, knowing that the true challenge was in the day-to-day and that every step counts toward a more just future. If this video has helped you connect more with yourself and inspired you on your growth journey, take action and subscribe to the Vidas Inspiración channel to discover more stories that will fill you with motivation and hope. I would love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment telling me how this story has impacted your life or what reflections it has left you with. And if you think this message could inspire someone you know, share it with your friends so they too can find inspiration and purpose in their lives.